Hi. In recognition of the first inaugural anniversary of Sustained Equity Group on Juneteenth, we're hosting our inaugural table talk, honoring empowered women, empowering women, Black women working on the front lines of violence prevention. Black women matter. Sustained Equity Group is committed to bringing equitable opportunities to Black women at the community level and working with organizations on the front line and behind the scenes of the fight against violence in Black and Brown communities. We have established a safe place for Black women, particularly uh, women. We have established a safe space for women of color, particularly for Black women, to share their stories, and talk about what they feel and how we together can make a difference. And so I am going to take a moment to introduce our table of phenomenal women. We first have Reverend Marcia L. Dyson. We also have Melanie Campbell, and then we have Cleopatra Cowley, and we have my co-moderator, Yasmin Fletcher Braithwaite. So I'm going to hand this over to my co-moderator, Yasmin.
Thank you, Kayla. So I want to start with some introductions, and I recognize that um, each of your stories would take longer than the time allotted for this table talk. But we would love to just have you briefly introduce yourself and tell us what brings you to this conversation today. We will start with uh, Reverend Marcia, and then we'll move on to Ms. Cleo, followed by Melanie, and then we'll follow up with Kayla at the end. So Ms. Reverend Marcia, would you get us started? You're on, you're on mute.
Because we are in the throes of celebrating Juneteenth, when people didn't know, Black people didn't know, slaves didn't know that they were free. And once that freedom was announced and actually realized, it was a celebration, which calls for music and dancing. And I believe that you dance with the one who brought you. So the reason why I'm at this table sitting here in harmony with you women, my sisters in the struggle, is because of Kayla Hicks, whom I met several years ago, really 2014 in Washington, D.C., and joined her in Virginia around gun violence. And also because of advocacy that I've done most of my life in my home city of Chicago around trying to abate or eradicate violence within our community. And it wasn't just with women, it was with men and women, something we're not able to talk about a lot, especially this past 3 years without seemingly to get canceled. So I'm here because I am definitely an advocate for eradicating violence, gun violence, police violence, and inner city violence. I call it so-called friendly fire. I'm a social activist at heart. I'm the follower of the esteemed Melanie Campbell, to whom you will be introducing later, who is a stalwart warrior, unsung hero, just now getting the sort of hymns that she should been had deserved for the work that she has done most of her adult life, if not even earlier in her university years. So I'm here because I'm in the sister dance, right? And I want to be where the peace resides, not the money resides only, but where the peace resides, with the possibility of us getting ourselves together and making those who have been responsible for some of our demise in our community to get their act together as well.
Very nicely stated, Marcia. Tough act to follow. I'm here because I think it's wonderful to be amongst such esteemed women, to be perfectly honest. I believe this is a topic of conversation we're about to enter that is important at all levels. And there is definitely issues as it relates to gun violence. There's also issues with trauma and the way it shows up in Black and Brown communities. And I think probably before eradicating gun violence, we probably can do some for trauma and assist the families that are experiencing unfortunate fates. So I'm here to learn something, to share something, and keep things rolling, I guess. And thank you, Kayla. I mean, of course, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the beautiful Kayla for and just accepting me and inviting me into her space. So I appreciate this very much.
Well, thank you. I am honored to be amongst these sisters in this space. I come to the conversation by invitation through a good friend of mine, Dwayne Crawford, who connected me with Kayla. And of course, my sister from another mother, Marcia Dyson, who is one of the baddest sisters I know out here, who is a fierce advocate for not just violence, but so many things about from a global perspective, who never forgets that the roots start at home. So she's able to do the global and the local to the national and international, and just good to be here with you. Sisters, the issue for me is something that it's a myriad of things, but primarily I'm an advocate, right? Fighting for the kind of policy changes we need to see happen that, but also deal with our sister Cleo, is it Cleopatra?
Yep. Cleo or Cleopatra.
Cleo or Cleopatra. I love that name. But just knowing that when you talk about trauma, you know, and how it's impacting our communities, it's urban, it's rural, it's everywhere. The gun violence is really tough in my hometown where I actually am now in Mims, Florida. A lot of killings, unsolved murders, things happening. Yeah, I go to DC and there's unsolved killings and murders, but also it's the police violence. It's so much violence in this country that it is a crisis for our community. And then when we talk about this last year with COVID and the impact it's having inside of homes, it's something we all have to address and just be a part of the solution. So I'm not an expert in it, but I am an advocate to fight for what's needed to try to make a difference.
And so, Yasmin, if you don't mind, I am going to ask before I give any introduction, because Marcia is so short on time and was, you know, so kind as she always is to show up for us. If you would go directly into asking Marcia whatever we're going to ask Marcia for today, so because I know you have to go, Marcia, I think it would be better to do that so that we don't have to kind of rush off and not be able to hear from Marcia.
Sure. So I want to just kind of ask you, Marcia, about mentoring and supporting other Black women. So we know that the leading cause of death of Black women is heart disease. Research has shown that Black people generally experience a higher proportion of chronic illness and associated disabilities than white people. Young Black females ages 15 to 24 are nearly 7 times more likely to be murdered by firearms than their white counterparts. Knowing the trauma, injury, violence, and death that plague Black communities, why is it important to you to continue mentoring and supporting others to elevate Black women's voices like Kayla Hicks, Tamika Mallory, and Ms. Cleo, who are on the front line of violence prevention?
First of all, I have to say that it all intersects with one another, right? Because if mama's not happy, nobody is happy. So when we look at the burden of the Black woman, often the single head of household, or even when we look at the young women that I mentioned, when I say young women, they can be from 50 all the way down to like 19 years old, because I'm 70 this year. So all of them are my babies. My son is 50 years old, right? And what I see, you know, we talk about, at least I have discussed with some individuals at Inception in Detroit. It's a great trauma, mind resetting, hard resetting, life-changing experience there in Detroit, is that we have within our DNA cellular memory, right? And I know that's true. Just even when I gave birth to my son, there was no discord in my first marriage. He was happy. I was happy with my daughter. There was major discord, and she cried so much, right? And so you imagine the legacy that we're talking about in creating for wealth. We also have that for trauma, and we can pass it on if we see no way out. And if so, to mentor young women, for me, it's just in my DNA. First and foremost, growing up in the city of Chicago, segregated and extreme, almost third world poverty. And I'm not being hyperbolic about that. Not in the 50s, most Black people were, right? We all lived in little Africa or some, out back in the Caribbean during that time period. I didn't have mentors. I didn't have anyone to instill a dream in me. I had a loving mother, right? A father who was absent, saved by a stepfather who graduated from Fisk University, who came and brought the idea that there was another horizon for me, right? So I never had that. I didn't have it in my career. I didn't have the dreams or set, even though I was going to university. Nobody stopped and said, Marcia, this is your possibility. I was really making a way out of no way. I really faked it till I make it because I saw things that I just wanted to do, especially public relations and marketing. And because I came out of a radical Black experience, especially my teenage years and my early 20s, I was definitely a social activist in the South Shore of Chicago, where we collaborated almost if we were Tulsa, Oklahoma, or, some of those cities that we look at and celebrate that seemed to disappear 100 years ago. We actually established that in the 70s in the South Shore community. Then I got mentored in a form of fashion through these very strong sisters in our quasi-Black Panther movement, and our knowledge that we were able to imbibe at the Topographical Center. But in my career, no mentorship. In my emotional understanding, no mentorship. For Black history, wasn't taught, right? None of these things. So it was incumbent upon me to make sure that I mentored young women, not just in careers. That's the last thing I tap into. It is into their souls, right? If Ellis Walker says that we must do the work our souls must do, how is your soul? What is informing your soul? What is the mission and goals of that soul's work? And for me, it has never been about monetary gain. It hasn't. I've done too many things for my nonprofit, given too many ideas and suggestions for free because they benefited what I utilize in my life, in my everyday form, which is purposeful social engagement. You can't teach that, but you can be around young people to let them see how that operates. And it's the tagline for my Women's Global Initiative, which is now turned into an institute this coming fall, because we have to be about purposeful. And I've learned not to be in poverty based on what I just told you earlier, but it's purposeful, profitable, social engagement, which can only come through the intent of the WGI collaboration. So I learned a lot from them. I'm not their mentor, often I'm their mentee. But it's also important when Cleo and Melanie talked about trauma. In the city of Chicago alone, 400 people were shot over Memorial Day weekend. It had nothing to do with the police. In 1985, with Air Gardner, who was the president of Salsheen Products, we created Black on Black Love. We would go to the community and have parades because we're going via positive. It wasn't a negative connotation, say like, hey, we got a problem in our house, right? And if I would, by social construction of race, and I was relegated to a tribe, hey, Black tribe, we got to get our ish together on the South Side. There's no line of demarcation on the West Side of Chicago. We need to deal with an issue. And I won't say that. I will not deny that. And I don't care if I'm counseled for it. I mean, John Legend took me on task because of something that I tweeted, which was about, I'm not concerned about, white man talking about Bill Maher when he was saying that he was a white nigger. I said, I'm more concerned about niggas killing niggas. And since I'm a nigga, I have license to say nigga, right? I mean, that's what they said. And he took me on. I said, you don't live in Chicago. You haven't seen what I have seen. You haven't seen children being shot, can't go out and play. I had a student who was actually in her home, in a frame home, shot in the leg, writing a bill, a woman killed. So it's not self-hate, it's about elevating us to a higher purpose. But at the same time, what creates that trauma? What created that law? What took us there is what Cleo and Melanie is talking about. It didn't happen overnight. right? It wasn't even the 400 years, because there was some point, I think in the 1980s, that something happened. And I'm looking at, yes, we have the legacy of slavery, but something happened. And I fell upon a quote that I like to use often. And Dr. King said, you don't hear it much, that we would integrate ourselves out of power. Remember the time when we like, in jokes, it's always the anecdote. If you did something wrong, with your mama wasn't home, your daddy often absent, then the woman down the street was going to beat you. Your teacher was going to beat you. We were segregated into our excellence, but also our moral values and principles, which I think dissipated somewhat to the extreme that we see this unrest, this cacophony of our children's lives that produce hip hop, right? The ingenuous and unharmonic aspect into which their world reside and how they respond to it musically, and also financially out of power. We can't go to Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? Black Wall Street, 1921, and end up having to replicate that in 2021 because there was a lag behind, even though we have a greater disposable income at Black. So all this, I think, is coming from what Cleo, and I hope can address this, and Melanie, because she's definitely on the street, can add to that conversation. But that's the reason why I mentor, to learn, to be example, to give anecdotes to story and the tradition of our storytelling, the experiences that I learned from my global travels, to say that we're not in this alone. We're traumatized like the people in Haiti, like the refugees in Syria camps that I've met, like the nomadic people in Eritrea, right? The Nigerian women who want to go to mosque in Mecca and can't go because of racism. We're all traumatized, and it's a heavy lift, and it's a burden that women must take. And I have to say this too, when we talk about women, because some people chide me and says, well, you know, you said something about a woman. I said, I believe, and I know for a fact that our genitalia, our biology, this wonderful thing in which God made us as female, does not dictate our moral character. It does not. It does not. There's too many ways into which that is expressed, unfortunately, right? All over the world, mothers having to honor killings, right? Our secretaries of state, women of war. I may have been somebody's bitch, and I do know some bees. I'm sorry to even say that word, but so we have to address the fractured sisterhood. We let white people come in and talk about, well, you light skin. Well, I had 6 siblings. And I had an aunt who could pass a white, and she called all of my mother, Rosie Elizabeth Smith's children, Rosie's little darkies. So, hey, I got a black skin complex and light skin. All right. So we need, and talk about our hair. I mean, it's these little petty things that sisters have to address in our politics, especially, and refusing to counsel us despite our affiliations, and to really grow beyond the constraints into basically white supremacy have painted us into, have traumatized us if we dare to step out of the bounds into which they subscribe because something is popular. So that is one of the great reasons, a long reason, why I love to mentor, because I never want anyone to end up being like me, with not having anyone to whom they can have a sound chamber, and you in the room by yourself and always hear this echo called you. That's why, and I'll end here, when I do travel, if I'm going someplace and I don't see me or somebody else like us in the room, I borrow from Lin-Manuel's Hamilton play, because most people can relate to it. I want to make sure they are in the room where it happens, so they can be educated, because the door have always been and often have been closed for me.
And Marcia, before you go, I want to make sure that I say this. So I met Marcia in 2008, and it's really just really special to hear you use the word mentor. And how I met Marcia is I was at the Turkish embassy with the late Rep. John Conyers. And I was walking around, I was touching stuff I wasn't supposed to. And one of his staffers told me not to touch something. And he told them she can touch whatever she wants to. And so we were walking by and we saw Marcia. And he says, he called me at that time, my maiden name during that, he said, you know, Stuart, if you want to get anywhere in life, You need to get over there. You need to meet that lady right there because she mentors you. You're going to go wherever you need to go. And he walked off. Anybody that knows Congressman Conyers, when he speaks, he leaves. Don't go anywhere with him and just not stay next to him because he'll leave you where you're at. His staff will get you where you need to go, but he's going to leave you. And so it sticks true to that. He told me that the mentorship would come. And I was thinking, why would Marcia Dyson mentor me? She doesn't know me. And she took me in that second. And then later on in 2014, when I started working, well, I started in 2013 on gun violence prevention. 2014, I needed somebody that was influential and that had the power to draw people to come to the room. And I just was like, there's no one's going to come to Virginia. Why would they come here? I called Marcia, and Marcia got on a train herself and came all the way to Virginia. No one knew it. It wasn't advertised. And that was when I learned that she doesn't there's no cause for applause. She shows up for the cause, for the people. And the kids loved her. There were trauma surgeons. We had a room full of Black police chiefs, assistant police chiefs, and Commonwealth attorneys. And she stayed down here with us. We did not have the crowd that we had desired to have from the community, but she literally came down here on her own time and dime and went back like she never was here and changed the way the organizing worked. And where there was no conversation about gun violence prevention in 2014, it is now basically the reason why Virginia constantly wins in our politics is when people talk about gun violence prevention. So Marcia, I'm so grateful and thankful that you always show up, and Sustained Equity Group could not celebrate the 1 year today without you. The late Congressman Elijah Cummings, believe it or not, introduced me to gun violence prevention because, as you all know, his nephew was murdered in 2011, I believe, and it was Norfolk, and that crime still remains unresolved. And he said, he sent me down to Kaiser Permanente with SEIU, and I just come back from California. He said, you need to go do this gun violence prevention, and I didn't know what it was. It was like, there's somebody working on gun violence prevention. And so I did that. And then I, talked to Marcia often, especially when it got really hard and difficult. And to lead into the other thing that you said so much, Marcia, is just want to just come up there and kidnap you and keep you with me. We got to get a Marcia act down here. But my quote has always been that pain taught me how to love, and love taught me nothing but pain. And that fractured sisterhood is so important for us to today come together and begin to repair and heal and show people that no matter what level you come from, that we're all still Black women, and there are women that don't look like us that support and love us too. But as women, and sisterhood is so essential. So I'm so forever grateful as you have helped me launch this organization, because I remember many times when I wanted to walk away, Elijah would tell me not to give up. But more importantly, it was the ultimate times when you were with your grandkids and they were playing, or you were with your son, wherever you were. And also, when I was in DC with your husband, and we were doing freeze frame for Debbie Allen, Whoopi Goldberg was the moderator there, and Felicia Rashad and Lee Daniels was there. You still were the star of that room. She just always is the star of the room. And I'm so grateful that you have mentored me, you have coached me, and you have supported me continuously. And when no one else was talking about gun violence, Marcia created Ring Out Gun Violence. And that is something that I hope we can uplift and elevate for this year coming into the new year, because there are a lot of people that die or are injured during New Year's when they let off firearms, because they don't think about where does that bullet have to go. So I'm hoping that we can continue supporting the work that Marcia does, but also each one of us be able to duplicate what she just left on the table. And because we built this table and we're sitting at it, share it with others to know the value and the importance to continuously give to others, regardless to what you don't get back, because that's not why we're here. That's not why we're here. So Marcia, thank you for being in my life, and I look
And
forward.
thank you for mentioning, Kayla, the Ring Out Gun Violence, because it does come from my experience in Chicago. And it was so that we can hear, since we're we're moved by our senses. My thought was, well, New Year's, instead of shooting guns, let's ring a bell for the person had been shot, or, some kind of way in which the community, it was corny at the time, but we are developing an app where we can give people the opportunity to silently make some sort of notice in the community collectively on the violence, to see how many times that things ring, so that we can see exponentially what we have to do, not what the police needs to do, but what we need to do in the community. How many chimes are there? But that's what I love about the work of Melanie Campbell, because there's so many things that we have to ring out that causes violence, like voter suppression, which Melanie handles, right? And the trauma causes gun violence, which Cleo, will address as well. So there's many things in which we ring out the violence. Violence is not just something in a little thing that you hold in your hand that shoots bullets. It is policies or lack thereof. It's past experiences, it's present situations. But I would think about if we can just embrace what Howard Thurman, a theologian, a Black theologian, once said, that we have to learn as Black people to scale down our hope and dreams, which is our immediate circumstance. But it's so hard when it's so clamorous and you think that that's all that there is. That's why I like a table. It's a kitchen table. So we can bring our collard greens and our jambalaya, our homemade lemonade. I hope somebody has some gin and tonic. Auntie likes a gin and tonic. So, and that's what it really is, the real deal. And I respect so much. And I'm going to say, because I want to hear Cleopatra and I want to hear, Melanie, because I respect them very, very much, like I do you, Kayla, and you, Miss Young Yasmin, as well. So I'm going to try to hold on. I'm going to text somebody, say, look, I may be a little bit, like 15 minutes late, so I can be engaged, because I'm not a queen. And Melanie knows this. Melanie, you can shake your head with this. Melanie has created things. I mean, she's getting like the pub that I think she deserves now, but she would create some stuff. And the head Negroes, right? And I'm calling them out. L. Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, Mark Muriel, Michael Eric Dyson, could be anybody. They're sending like they created stuff, and I would like part in the water. I'm her Moses stick, right? And push Melanie up there, and she doesn't act like, some people say, well, I did, and that, like, no, that's not Melanie. So if anything, I get that some of my humility, especially from DC, from Melanie. We're here to do the work, right? If we can get a body not to drop or a tear not to fall, we've done the work. If we can get people to vote, we've done the work, right, Miss Melanie? And that's what she means to me. I mean, I tell everybody, like, who's your leader? Melanie Campbell's my leader, and she's my mentor. And I say that with great conviction, because she is, and she knows that I have great love and respect for her. And you too, Miss Cleo and Kayla and Yasmin, because this is what will mend us, to saying why we love each other more so than why we hate each other. I mean, everybody cannot be, there are some reprobate minds, and we can put them aside, but not these women at this table. I'm glad to have a seat with you, and I want to sit a little bit longer out of respect for what Cleopatra and my sister Melanie, what their soul work is, and to hear and to share.
Well, on that note, I'd love to hear from Miss Melanie, if you have anything, to respond to what Reverend Marcia has said.
Thanks, Yasmin. And Marcia, it said there's nothing like some sister love, and it's a good love fest, and that's what we do need. We need more love. It's too much hate going on. It's too much violence going on out there. I tell this story, Marcia, I haven't even shared it. Like I said, I'm down in Florida, my hometown, where never did I think I'd be afraid to walk the street, down the street. I grew up on a dirt road, right? It's paved now. We grew up on a dirt road. We didn't wear no shoes, right? Didn't have to. But our babies are killing each other, even in my hometown. And these murders aren't being solved. People are afraid of our own children. So we've got to get together on what's happening. And I think part of it, I mentioned in my opening of the conversation, some of it, I think is related to what people have been going through for this past year. Some of the things that, especially our children, our young people, and we're not able to fully grasp the impact. And I think we're seeing it on the street. Yes, there's always been gun violence, right? It's nothing new, but there's something different happening that I don't want to say this in the right way. It's something different happening. I'll just leave it there. And so we all have to figure some of this out as we fight for all these other things. And so for me, when I was asked, Kayla, when Dwayne reached out, I said, oh, this is not my level of expertise. But hey, guess what? It's all of our responsibility to figure out how we can do something to make it better, right? So for me, that's kind of where I'm sitting in this thing right now, and having been in some circumstances where you see young people zooming by, shooting at each other right by my house that I'm sitting in right now, where I had an 87-year-old aunt sitting outside. I think, you hear about Chicago, the urban community, right? But these babies are shooting each other, some of them related. The street tell you what's going on. Cops might not know what's going on. Street tell you what's going on, right? But we've got to figure out what's going on with our babies that we need to do better. And so that's heavy on my mind right now, right? And so as we fight simultaneously to stop the police violence, right? That's still being perpetuated, and COVID didn't stop people from killing us as this past year. So we got that, right? So those are the kind of things when I think about the violence. I'm thinking about the babies, I'm thinking about the brother and the sisters, we worry about getting stopped. So all of these things that are happening, but there's also what's happening within our community, but also the systems that are in place that we have to find a way to tear those down, right? So for me, I've been fighting with others, right? I believe in coalition. I believe in what happens for Black women. Us owning, part of the solution to me is us owning our power, right? Yes, it's political, right? But it's also the way we lead and the way we find ways to make a way out of no way, right? All those things that our foremothers had to deal with, and our grandmothers and all that, right? But we have to own that power in a way to force the change we need to see take place. So those are just some of my reactions, Kayla, to that, is just thinking about how we come to this, and how we all have to, because our communities in crises. What's happening in Chicago is our babies. What's happening in my little town here in Miss Florida, those are all our babies. I didn't birth any, right? But I sure have a whole lot of nieces and nephews. Think I did. But the reality is they're all our babies, and we have to figure out, we've got to do some different kinds of things to address it, because they are traumatized, Cleo, right? They are traumatized, but all these things that are happening are interpersonal, but also systemic. So that's my initial response. Yasmin, I'm sorry, you asked me that question.
Not a problem. And Ms. Cleo, something you said earlier in your introduction really stuck with me about we have to address trauma before we can address gun violence. I'd love you to kind of talk more about that. And I think Melanie kind of brought that up again in what she was saying.
Yeah, so what I mean by that is what stood out for me when my daughter was murdered, and there was a draw of people that wanted to get my involvement in different things, is that the involvement that was being requested, or the assistance from me that was needed, was for everyone else. No one thought about what I would need or my family would need in order to just cope. It was more about, okay, how will you show up in this room to give a physical a visual for like an actual family that's been affected or impacted by violence. So I walk into a room, and if there are people who are likely to be future perpetrators of any kind, they will look at me and feel their hearts would swell, or it would give them a consideration because I am somebody's mother, and therefore I may look like their mother, and have a greater, more impactful conversation. However, that's me helping them. That's me helping those families. There's no one helping mine. And so I thought about it. I'm like, I didn't have the words for it because, of course, when you are thrust into a situation like this, you're traumatized and, in need of words that properly define where you are. I had two children, have two children. I have two children. I always say that. I have two children. One was murdered, my daughter, my oldest child. I also had a son, have a son, and which now presents me with a different set of concerns. Before, I was concerned with living my life in a way that my daughter Hadia, could benefit from in terms of what to do, how to be a lady, how to be treated, how to have voice, how to educate yourself, how to handle yourself, those things at minimum, right? But post her death, you know, I'm working with my son to show him that when things happen to you, you don't necessarily have to, you fall, but you don't have to stay there. You may be even sink on your way up, but you can still stand. And we're going to figure out how to do that and what it looks like. And I'm going to fight for you, because what people forget is he suffered a different type of trauma. And that is that of being a sibling, that of being a young man, that of believing that he was supposed to protect his sister. So now that's a different level of trauma, a different type of talk, a different type of conversation and engagement. And knowing when to speak on that, knowing when to be quiet as a parent matters. And I think embracing that, I had to first embrace it for myself. So to think for myself, what exactly, I'm going through all this, what exactly is it that I need? How was I able to survive so many different traumatic things that happened after the major one, which are called another setback? And it was a determination to move forward. I had desired to live. I wanted to do that. And therefore, I was able to put momentum behind that. And I'm still able to do it in order to continue to thrive. I use myself as a catalyst because no greater expert do I know other than myself. And I say that because I am imperfect and I am okay with that. And so, in dealing with truth, I don't have to have a perfect person sit in front of me who has a traumatic experience. That person who sits in front of me that experiences something similar to myself is a parent, period. You show me a perfect one, I'll show you a liar. So, I think that there are, unfortunately, there's levels to the trauma. There's levels to the community that I now find myself a part of because, was your child good? Was your child bad? Was your child national? Was your child local? Is your case solved? And my case is not solved. Is your a mess? And there's no greater loneliness than looking at a person or people that should get you, shun you. And so I wish not to be a part of that. My desire is to give light to the fact that there is trauma happening and it's happening in a lot of ways. So again, when they say hurt people, the examples that I just provided for you are examples of that. So we have to find a way to resolve these issues of trauma, which is provide in the Black and Brown communities that which is available in other communities. And that is access, resources, finances. Because what interests me is that when there's a um, police involved shooting, there's a lot of checks that get written. They find money. But right on the everyday in the Black and Brown community, just regular everyday people who are killing each other, which it shows that there's a trauma and there's a um, um, finances that are needed because, of course, the people that would help would need to be paid for their time. I get that, or volunteer some of it, but there has to be facilities. Somebody's going to have to, need some sort of help in a capacity. We need to get those resources over there so that we can start to have meaningful conversations. We can start to show people that they matter. And it's in all different capacities. So it's not just showing, mom that she matters. Perhaps dad needs to understand that he matters too, as well as the offspring. Because if one person is educated in the house and the other three are off, there's still discourse. So we have to, discuss the issue of trauma, because it is not something to breeze over. It's something we carry into every other community that we find ourselves a part of.
Can I interject there? Because you made me think, may I?
Absolutely.
I think one thing that is alarming when you talk about, and I'm sitting like, okay, I know, Cynthia, is that when you talk about trauma, what is an indicator too is something that we didn't hear. I mean, at least even a decade ago, is about Black children committing suicide. You know, uh, 20-year-old Black kids committing suicide. And I was with some young man, and he was asking why was he out protesting. He said, well, I have nothing to live for, so if they shoot me, either here or there or whatever. But isn't it alarming, whether Kayla, I think we should talk about the increase in suicide amongst Black kids. And it's not just beyond the bullying, it's just maybe that despair. I think bullying has a lot, and some has been by most white kids bullying Black kids, but I'm seeing just like this kid's attitude. So I'm shooting you because it's really almost a form of genocide, what we're doing to each other, which is a form of, as far as I'm concerned, suicide, as fratricide, it would be the right word for it, because of the lack of caring, because maybe we haven't cared enough. And I'm talking about my generation, right? Or the ways into which that I was talking about that void. Where was that void when I quoted Dr. King? When did we segregate ourselves out of our moral authority that we could at least save our children, no matter what was going on? Because remember, we come out of 400 years, but there was one point that was safety. I tell my grandkids, and my grandmother could say the same thing with me, that I had a better childhood. I had the same kind of childhood my grandmother had, who would have been 100 and something. My mother had, even though it's all in poverty, because I could go out and play without being shot.
Mm-hmm.
You could stay out until the street lights were out, even in the city of Chicago, right? You could do double dutch. You could fly a kite. You don't see any of that. And the fear for me, I had to go all the way, as I think I told Hillary Clinton. I said, you know what? I was in the Middle East, and I was in the largest refugee camps. And I'm looking at countering that to the Robert Taylor homes in Chicago, which were sequestering. They were refugee camps in forms of ways, if you go with my anthology. And I said, I saw children without, all these white bunkers, like how they used to put us in the trailer school rooms when they didn't have enough buildings, or didn't want to build for us. And I didn't see any dolls, any toys, or any of that. And I asked, once I went back to, it's called the UNHCR, I asked the person who was German, I raised my hand. I said, why don't these kids have these things? How come they can't have this gaiety? How come they can't have this so-called age of innocence, right? I know it's a Band-Aid, but post-earthquake Haiti, we took in crayons. I mean, artists, they have their own art therapy, because indigenously, Haiti is one of the most creative, expressive, island republics there is. So the kids would take oil bottles and make cars, a kite. We took stencils. They did rubber art. They made art out of their demise post the earthquake. And when I was leaving, this man is 6'5", and I had on flats, and I'm 5'2", and he was German. So I'm like, oh, he's all the Gestapo, right? He put his hand heavily on my head, and he said, quietly, what you asked for is dangerous. I'm like, I said, toys, kites, crayons, children, things, flowers for the women. He says, yes, because you don't see the men here. And the men wanted the women not to have any hopes, and girls not to have hope and dreams, and the boys to be prepared to die. And they clicked on me. I said, well, these kids without this age of innocence, anybody without an age of innocence is undoubtedly going to become a terrorist. And then I said, oh my God, it took me going to the Middle East to find out what was happening collectively in my hometown in the Midwest, maybe. When do we erase the possibility for children to have an age of innocence, trials, and errors, right? With not being counseled to trip over something, to grow, to touch nature. All these things, I think, are some of the factors really within our community, the way they're constructed, like the Robert Taylor homes, the projects, definitely how they gentrified, definitely, because right, if we can't divide you and push you out in the suburb, we're going to just bulldoze you, put passageways in your community, we're going to do everything to separate you, because collectively we are that moral fiber. And it made me just intensely think more about what Dr. King had said, and how we need to go back in some forms and fashion, which we all do in a way, but we need to do it even more. How do we can we create community that is now so dispersed, and create this womb? What is the vehicle? How can we use technology? How can we use our social uh, activism to create this room that I was nurtured in? Whether I was poor, didn't have a car in my house till I was 16, can tell Bill Cosby jokes and mine be for real, right? How can, and still felt safe, still had this joy, still had these dreams, and would never could think about wanting to commit suicide. I would like my sisters, I don't mean to take over, but I just, this is something I need mentoring with, because I struggle with it, right? Outside of our police brutality and the systemic forms of race, have we like aborted our wombs morally in our community?
That's a lot to unpack. If is it okay that I speak on that, Yasmin? That's a lot because I'm from Chicago, Marcia. I'm not sure if you know, so I have opinions about that. It goes back to when they made it convenient for kids to call on their call the police and say they were being child abused. I remember that when that happened, I believe I was in like third grade, third or fourth grade. And I was like, yes, I finally I'm gonna be able to call and tell, you know? And I say that jokingly. I know that's you laugh because you know what I mean. Because all the little, you get your little
My
behind
daughter
whoop.
tried that. She needed to call police by the time I got finished with her. I was calling police on myself.
Exactly. But again, if you remember that time, they really put the fear in people, and especially in our community, keeping our families together. So I remember I never heard it more, just more and more often where, people's families were, being broken because, they gave one little whipping to somebody and therefore, one little corrective action to someone. And the child was able to call and say what they said, really didn't mean it. By the time they were thrown in the system, to someplace random, they wanted to go back home. But now you've created a whole set of issues. And so it spans out, right? So now we get less and less discipline and correction at home. And it dissipates into the school. Then you take out the prayer out the school, you take out the discipline out the school, so now you got these young people that are without guidance and meaningful correction because they don't understand consequence, and that's why we find ourselves the way that we do. I mean, there's it can go deeper than that, but I'm saying for me in Chicago, I can date it back to then, and I can also date it to the tearing down of the projects, not understanding what you were getting rid of, and the disbursement of people just wherever throughout the city of Chicago, where violence was once kind of tunneled in a particular space and area because it was, the how do you say it, the culture in those particular groups or environments or communities. Now you've taken those people out of that place and put them everywhere. And so now the violence is literally everywhere across the city of Chicago. Now, that's been some time ago, but again, what we do, we pass trauma down. We pass it forward. And so if it's not addressed then, at least we've got to a point now where I can say I am excited that this group of young people have no problem communicating. They have no problem addressing the fact that there's difference. There's no problem talking about mental health And, I'm saying in the young people themselves. So I can see when they are of age, possibly to take care of themselves, that these conversations will continue to grow. But until then, that's the way I cite or source the issues that we're experiencing.
And the other, and I ditto, right? And this uh, feeling like the 6 weeks or so that I've been here has opened my eyes to what um, I don't have to see every day, right? Or deal with. So, but the other part of it that I've seen in the state of Florida, I keep bringing it back to this place, is the access to the weaponry is unbelievable what folks can get. And that's what's on the streets, and so I think about Lucy Macbeth, who's now a congresswoman from Georgia, whose son was murdered, by a crazy white man, right? But she's been fighting that fight, on the Hill, and that's a component of the systems that are allowed to provide that kind of access that a 14-year-old could have a Uzi, and whose mind has not even been fully developed to know what they're doing, right? So for me, that's the other part of what we have to find a way to deal with. I think about, I spent many years in Atlanta, and when I go to Atlanta, I have a lot of family in Atlanta. And I went to school in the Atlanta University Center, Clark College, then now Clark Atlanta, and everybody was together, right? So the public house. So when you go to any urban center, you're right. There's disbursement, right? But that does not mean that what's needed, it follows them, right? So to deal with the kinds of ways of community has been lost in many ways for us because of a lot of that, right? And we don't connect, and we don't have, and I feel that and I honestly cannot say I have the magic wand in my head. I'm grappling with it. Can we be real? Like grappling it. What do we need to do? So when this came up, Kayla, I was like, okay, there's a reason, right? That we're connecting and having this conversation, but we got to take it, this more. Like, what else can we do? How, Kayla, can I support you, right? Because this is like a passion for you. How do we stay connected? Hearing Cleo, your story, right? Because telling the stories, but also the actions that we have to take. I live in Virginia, girl, right? So we got to catch up, right? When I get back, whenever I'm able to be there these days, I'm gone. But say not post COVID, but whatever we are in the stage down here, September they're gonna see a whole lot of people in the hospital because nobody wearing a mask. That's another story, right? Nobody wears a mask down here, but. So that's where my head is like, okay, we have to, fight the fight, but how do we also build that level of community? Because a lot of times, I know people now, they don't even know what we're talking about when we talk about what the community was like, because they didn't grow up with any of that, right? The lady down the street, she better not say nothing to me, right? So there's no respect of elders because it didn't come up through that process. And that's not blaming, that's what do we do? How do we find a way to deal with it? And one, just sharing and knowing, like, this is a conversation I haven't really had, right? That we're having today. So I want to figure out how, from where I sit, other things that I need to do, just listen my own hometown to wherever else that can be done across this country, because we have to save our babies so they can have a quality, that they can dream, right? Too many of them think that this is it. I'm not going to live. So I'm just going to deal with what I got to deal with now, right? So.
Yasmin, is it okay if I say something? I'm
Please.
prone to talk. So just but I wanted to say you point you point a lot of good things out. And the ask of, what do we do? How do we fix it? What's the answer? For me, part of the conversation or part of the solution is a conversation with the young people themselves. We know what we had, but we don't understand what they are living because we haven't lived it. We sympathize, right? But we don't understand what that's like when they're in school all day. I don't know what it's like to be 15 uh, and associate death with a real thing. Like these kids literally are they're without innocence. Like they So I always have conversations with my son in truth. Like we talk in truth. Like, okay, so what's going on? Let's talk about it. I fight for him. I give him therapy. I do whatever. And I'm not telling his business. It's just the truth. And he knows it's, I'll get myself therapy. So I believe that we need to normalize, I say humanize being Black. We need to normalize, getting assistance when we need it. So that way we can help ourselves. But again, how can we do that if we don't have resource, right? If you have resource and you use it, well, some of us, or we should. But, so I say to you, we don't have the answer. We have conversation. We have, thoughts about it. But I think through a coupling with the young people, I think we could find solution.
Can I add to that? It goes back to the mentoring. Even I have mentored high school students, definitely university students, but I implant myself into a lot of the schools I did in Washington, D.C. and every city that I lived in, that I became a volunteer through the Chicago History Makers. Kind of helped me with that enroll where you go and speak, and I go to that school and like they thought I was a teacher because I kept coming back. And then, I would get on the boards like at the Richard Wright Charter Public High School in Washington, D.C. for journalism and media arts. So I do try to infiltrate. And one thing I do tell the kids, I don't go there to tell them, I go there to show them. And I told them that the best representative for you is to your peers. So you got to be with the peers to teach the peers or to give them some sort of inroads, to give them some new knowledge. So I would take books, have conversation, learn what they're learning and sit at the table, like Jesus at the well with the woman, be where you are. I wish I could go back to 15 and correct a whole lot of mistakes, but I don't have time for that, all those regrets. But, I do try to meet them where they are. And so imbibing, and volunteering in schools, what Susan Taylor is doing with CARES mentoring has been a tremendous help to so many families and to so many, talk about a platform, and even though she's in a lot of cities nationally, when you think of our vast population, and there's still, like we have food deserts, there is that mentoring deserts, especially for youth, and only so many kids can be mentored by her national organization. So I was wishing that, back in the day, you go to vacation Bible school, you wish that the church, I don't know when the churches became scaredy cats. I'd be cussing out preachers, don't even go to church on Sunday. I'm so pissed at them, often because, except for there's a minister in Houston, he had the dynamics of the building of his holy ground, so to speak. The sanctuary was small and the social center was big. And that's my thing, it should be like a gas station. The gas station is big, the car is small so you can get somewhere. So I really have taken on, and I told my clergy friends, like, you know what? you know, I'm gonna go hip hop. Jesus ain't gonna come back. Like, why call it a comeback after 2019 years that was then? And after my blood, sweat, and tears, you niggas are still here because you ain't doing the work. You're supposed to do anti-prison ministry, not prison ministry. Don't nobody need you when they're there, right? We need the anti-prison ministry. So I don't know why Melanie don't let me preach. I don't know, but maybe that has a lot to do with it because I'm taking them to task. You got all the resources, you have the edifices, right? And you're not working on, you forget saving the soul, save their bodies, save their bodies. So, well, anyway, I try to go to church, but they kicked me out. And you know it, Melanie, because you know I raised hell, right? Yeah, but we have to look at it, and that's another thing that's lost. The church was that vacation Bible school. Let me tell you a very sad story. I had just come back from Haiti, and the violence was horrible in Chicago, and I met with Father Flager. And though they wanted to interview me about what was happening in Washington, D.C., but I said, I'm going back to my hometown, Chicago. I just came from City Soleil, where they said it's the most dangerous place in any of the Caribbean islands, but nothing is as violent as the South Side of Chicago. So when I went, I said, and now I want to take you over here to where Cora Berry, the former First Lady of DC, had the Southeast Tennis Center. And I said, don't talk to me, talk to these kids. And so the ABC came, and they brought with Trayvon White, you know, the representative and city council at large. So I had him to get some of the students together for me. And when they started, these kids started telling their stories. The cameramen who were white started to cry. But here's something that was bittersweet. There was one young man. It was August, so you would think these kids would want to be on the street, but they couldn't. There was one young man, you know, told the story that I asked him, how are you managing the streets? He said, well, I dress sometimes, I would dress in a black suit, a white shirt, and a bow tie. I'm like, why? He said, well, you know, there's a great respect for the fruit of Islam. And I said, okay, and how that worked for you? He said, well, I was beat up once and, you know, it didn't work. I said, why? He said, because somebody came up to me and they said something and I didn't know how to respond. I said, they said, Assalamu alaikum. He said, I think that was it. So they were testing him. I mean, imagine this children costuming himself, wrapping himself under the premise of the strong black pillar men of the fruit of Islam to walk the streets safely on the southeast side of DC. He went to that extreme to have peace in the summertime, to have that age of innocence. I mean, we all were crying by then. The girls with the big hoop earrings on that people probably would have pushed aside. They were all there in that sanctuary of the Southeast Center trying to be safe together. Kids you thought would want to be hanging out on the street corner, maybe selling something, even carrying a gun. And they had on all the external stuff, but inside they were these babies. And I will never forget that. I will never forget that. So we know that their hearts are there, but we have to harness them. And, you know, when I talk about Susan Taylor, then I definitely, Cora Masters Berry has done a great work for those children over there. And those are the kind of things that, you know, I meant to go back and tell them we need to take back again to the church and other places. If the city's going to give money, then that's how we need to build, right? Our girls are obese because you don't have no place to play. You took out physical ed, you took out their credibility, I mean, their creativity, and wonder why they don't have any art. Why don't you have that art therapy like the kids had in Haiti after the earthquake? Because you took out those possibilities under school cuts, right? And so all these things that can help us with our trauma, right? They said, if you exercise, help trauma, aid in the school system. Forget us, our concern as Black women about our hair, you know, it's not even that. I said, we can do the electric slide for an hour, right? We down for that, but there's no capacity for creativity or for the sacredness of the womb that has, as you brought out, Cleo, and, you know, Melanie, you're seeing, that has been extrapolated, I believe, intentionally from our community, that we have to rebuild that. Like we want to build Black wealth, we have to build Black mental wealth, like Charlemagne the God says on the Breakfast Club. And I do have to leave. But I hope we can continue this conversation, Kayla. And I'm hoping that will be not at your second anniversary, but with you, Cleopatra and Melanie, is something that we really need to address with our Black Women's Roundtable, to put that on our agenda.
And so we will, and I know you have to go, and I'm so thankful to have had you here. There's so many notes, so much stuff that I want to just jump into, but I will I will say, Marcia, we agreed that we would do this quarterly, the featured table talk here, and I'm looking forward to seeing your faces again for the quarterly table talk. But we do monthly talks with the community and individual talks with each one of you. Um, I want to thank each one of you for sharing as much as you did. There's so much more that we need to share. And I will say, Marcia, my nickname used to be Polly back in the day, and it wasn't a term of endearment. I didn't know or understand what poly meant, and poly victimization is what the whole word is. And so, as each one of you shared about investing in children, investing in our communities, I think it's important for people to understand that those kids that were dealing with those sort of things grew up like myself, dealing with multiple victimizations of different types at the same time, meaning I went through the foster care system, raped, abandonment, abuse, neglect, all of those things I experienced. I experienced being threatened to be shot for a very long time, because if I told what was happening to me, people would shoot me. So the fear of being shot is gun violence as well. So there's so many levels of things that have happened in my life that brought me to this space right here where I'm at. And as you leave, I say, Marcia, you helped me to start off and dream about having SEG, Sustained Equity Group. And I created to have a safe space for us women here to have these conversations. Because the factor is that we must invest in the caretaker, the guardian, or the parent of the child or children if we really want to impact long-term sustainable change. And that looks like investing in us Black women. And we have to continue these conversations. The sisterhood is not fractured. This is a representation of what happens when Black women get together. We win and we lead. And so, Marcia, I know you have to go. I'm hoping that Melanie and Cleo, that you can stay for a little while longer, but we look forward to having you back again. Marcia, we are certainly excited about ringing out gun violence coming in this year. A new way to celebrate a new year is Black women come together. Maybe we can get 1 million Black women to ring a bell and ring out gun violence, not travel to any one place, but where you are at. If you want to travel somewhere, we'll get them to go to your state capital or go to a local center and ring it out together in representation of the children, the mothers, the uncles, the brothers, and Cleo. Cleo, most people don't understand that Wear Orange Day was for Cleo and for Hadiya. It is now known for many different reasons, but for us as Black women, we will always remember, we will always know that Hadiya is the reason why we wear orange every. Okay.
Thank you.
Marcia, I'm going to let you, if you want to say something before you go. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Just God bless you, and for each of you, your work and your purpose, that you do it boldly, that you do it strongly, and not necessarily alone. God bless you.
Lovely meeting you.
Happy Juneteenth, sis.
Happy Juneteenth. Hello. We got to say, a lot of people are still not free, but we will free them. Thank you. Bye, loves.
Yasmin, if you don't mind, I will, I think because of time's sake, maybe go to the space of, I was supposed to circle back and do an introduction of who I am. So I'm Kayla Hicks, and I am the president and CEO and founder of Sustained Equity Group. And I come to this work and I come to this table because of each of the women that are here. As I stated, Marcia is the person that mentored me since 2008 and stuck by my side when she had no reason to, and encouraged me to keep going. So Elijah Cummins introduced me to gun violence. Marcia helped me stay in gun violence prevention. And then Marcia took me to my very first roundtable in DC where I met Melanie. I didn't know who she was. I just know she had a room full of women, Black women, laughing, dancing, singing, supporting each other. It was like going to, I like cake, so going to the bakery and looking at all the, the yummy stuff. It was like, are you serious? This happens? And it was just a collection of love in that room. And Melanie taught me how not just to be happy amongst women of color. And there were women that were white there. That it was a group of, it was sisters in that room. But Melanie taught me the importance of policy. And I learned in that room that if policy doesn't change, everything remains the same. And then she helped me to understand how important it was to start talking about data and understanding how that impacts communities and how that translates into the community where people that are being impacted by gun violence would not understand just this data. So I turned research into relationships and started to talk the narrative of our community and the way that they understood it. And then from there, as I, worked for several years in gun violence prevention, I worked with Yasmin for years. And Yasmin is such a powerful young lady. And I'm looking forward to all that she's going to do as she shows up here today in her own personal right and space to share with us. Yasmin helped me to bring Sustained Equity Group to fruition. She has this way of allowing different perspectives without judgment, but she also has a way of making sure that things are done correctly in the sense that if it's evidence-based, what makes it that? She is going to dot the I and cross the T and give you a hug. Well, not a hug, but she'll make you feel nice. She'll make you happy. And so she walked that walk with me. And I'm often invisible because of learning. I didn't know what standing on the shoulders of giants meant until I did meet Marcia and people like Melanie. And I realized that at that point, I didn't know who they were because there was someone standing on their shoulders. So they taught me the art of the lift. So right now, and I'm gonna, stop here and go back to you, Yasmin. Right now, what I look at is as I struggle in this organization, like most do, for funding, because I am not the individual that's out front. It is my job to lift. And when I say lift, I look at Cleo, and my responsibility to this beautiful young woman is to make sure that any influence, any resource, any support, anything that I have to assist her, that I provide her that. It is not my responsibility to show up at the White House, in any place that I can go to or am invited to, if I know that Cleo, who has lost her child, should be there. So we at Sustained Equity Group identify, train, and support Black women in this work. It is my sole focus is to make sure that we can provide the tools that are necessary for the skill set that is required to survive in a nonprofit space where research consistently shows that Black women are not in an equitable space. For me, I am not fiscally sponsored. I am a 501c3 organization. There is no one that oversees me. And that is what makes it more difficult, because it's not just about white men or other individuals not supporting. I also don't get the support from Black individuals. And Cleo has seen this, and she is impacted by it often, where most people want to see Cleo because the Obamas came to her daughter's funeral. How can I get close to her so that I can maximize my visibility because of who she is? Then I can get some funding by saying she's associated with me. From day one, Cleo and I become sisters. It was just instant because we understand empathy, we understand compassion, but we mostly understand the quote that I stated, that pain taught both of us how to love. And love always teaches us pain, but it's a necessary lesson for us to prepare our children to have a better world than what we have. And I just really sincerely hope that these table talks that are specific to violence and to helping Black women to get elevated I sincerely hope that they will be priorities for most of these organizations, whether they're Black-led or not, that say they're equitable, that they will start to make the choices and decisions that mean that people like Cleo, myself, um, Crystal Turner, Clemmy Green, Margaret Eady. I have thousands of women that I know on a first name basis that I can call that have Cleo's story. And none of it gets any easier. None of it. And so I really am really excited about what we're doing here today. And I'm hoping that that people recognize it. This is not just about gun violence. We are more than that. We are more than our trauma. We are more than our pain. And we're going to continue to promote healing. That's what I have. That's what I'll leave it at, Yasmin.
I wanted to just say something that, or a few things that have kind of stuck with me today. I'm very honored to be in this space with all of you. I still call myself new to gun violence prevention. I've only been in the space since 2017, I want to say. And I don't remember when I met Kayla during that first year. But from the beginning, she was a mentor. And I've heard that word used over and over and over again today. And it reminds me of the importance of having someone in your corner, someone who looks like you, even if you have different experiences. And I think about, I taught for a couple of years in Houston, Texas. And as a teacher, you're also a mentor. And each of your students have stories. And sometimes it's hard to really see those stories because you see them as that student who may be behaving in a way that you do not appreciate in that moment. But when Marcia mentioned hearing those children's stories in Southeast DC, and it's like, yeah, they're dressed in a certain way. The way they dress doesn't tell you anything about them. And unfortunately, in this society, that is what people see and make that the initial impressions based on that. And that impacts us so much. It's very frustrating, it's disheartening. And I really think about that when I think about police violence, especially, right? This initial impression made based on an appearance, maybe a fear. So it's just, there's a lot that I'm kind of unpacking in my head as we go along. And it's just my way of saying that I really appreciate this conversation. I appreciate this space because I'm here to learn. And you all are speaking and reminding me that, like, I have so much that I need to be doing, right? I need to take advantage of the opportunities that have been presented to me, including being in this space with you, but also, just my experiences and mentoring, right? Why did I get away from that when I left teaching? That should have never happened. So I just want to thank all of you for being here, for sharing your stories, your experiences. And I really do hope that the conversations continue. And then the last thing I will say is that when Kayla started Sustained Equity Group, she and I went back and forth a number of times, me just trying to gain clarity on what she was hoping to accomplish with this organization, because my sole focus was on gun violence prevention, just because that's the space that I was in. But being in this conversation and having in previous conversations, but especially in this one right here, the gun violence that connects us, but it's so much more than that. And I just hope that, again, these conversations continue and we continue to explore everything else that's beyond this one thing that connects us.
I'm sorry about that. I'm going to ask each one of you, because this is just, like I said, this is a talking space for us. We can all come off of mute. What's important to me is to ask each one of you just to share why you think a space like Sustained Equity Group is important, because when I started it, I knew I had to, because in 2013, I had no mentor, as Marcia Dyson spoke about how she started all that she did because she didn't want anybody else to feel that. And I did not want others to suffer the way that I did, because it is if you're dealing with trauma every single day and you're traumatized yourself, that is very detrimental to your health. And when Marcia mentioned about obesity, we've got to really be mindful to start having the conversations that obesity is a part of trauma. A lot of us don't even understand what trauma does to us. And so the cohort that my organization established is the first 8 weeks is all about trauma. And learning what it is, what it does to your body, how it changes your brain, and how we respond to it. And it teaches about triggers and coping skills, and it does it in ways that people can easily understand and digest. And then we go right into self-care and beyond meditation and yoga and a walk. But what does self-care really look like for us? How can we really take care of ourselves when we really don't have time to? Because we really don't. I have sons. We all have people that we love. I worry about my children being killed every day because of the way society is set up. It is systematically set up to harm us. And we've got to teach us, how do we survive and how do we thrive? It's about our healing and about what we do to find that independent wealth. And what I want to make sure that we are able to express is why having a space to help identify, train, and support and create a network of Black women, whether they are in organizations or in the community, to be able to give them the tools, resources, and support. And most importantly, like for myself, I need funding. I'm not going to exploit Cleo. I love Cleo. She ain't let nobody exploit her anyway, but I'm not going to exploit Cleo or Yasmin or any of the beautiful women that are coming with the monthly table talks. I'm not going to exploit them to gain. I have lots of connections and know lots of people, but that doesn't serve the purpose. That doesn't help, because I was all by myself as a little Black girl, a little brown girl. Nobody cared about what I've gone through. People think that I am, a sorority girl. These two sorority sisters, Cleo and Yasmin, AKAs, people think that you a Delta or you AKA?
I love y'all anyway. I do. See, I got a little green on.
I didn't get that opportunity, and I'm here for the women that didn't, because I used to want to be a part of something, but I was denied it, because when I went to school, before I got home, I was terrified. I was always worried about where was I going to hide. I didn't want to be abused or neglected. So I didn't get the opportunity to be in a sorority, because I didn't get an opportunity to go to school until I was in my late 30s. I'm 50. And I am now 4 classes away from my master's degree. I did it all late, right? So I know what that means. And I want us to be able to show up as who we are. And Melanie, thank you for your shoulders. Thank you. And I'm going to ask you to go first.
Okay. Well, again, Kayla, thank you for the invitation. For me, I always believe that God brings us together for such a time. And that's so I feel that we were connected for a reason, right? Do I have all the answers of what that means? Nope. But I know we didn't just connect to get on this box for an hour or whatever, and that's it. So I'm looking forward to how we stay connected and how we are able to lift each other, because shoulders I stand, we all standing right? And just for me, whatever, you know, ways I can utilize whatever I have that can move the needle for us. I just try to be open to what that looks like. So the issues, and I don't believe it's an accident that I've had to physically see violence in a way that I haven't had to see since my days on a campus, in the hood in Atlanta, Georgia, or where I stayed and I lived in the neighborhood because I chose to do that at that time in my life. I've not had to see it come right in my face in that way. And that's and so then when the invitation came, I was like, wonder why. So then I wasn't honest until I got on the call that I said, okay, there's the connector to this. So what is I'm supposed to be doing? How am I supposed to support my sisters that y'all are carrying this? Cleo, honestly, until you shoot it over, it didn't connect. I knew you were in the space. So it's like, oh, I remember that. We didn't know each other, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So there's a reason for it. So I'm just ready for whatever that's going to look like, ladies, right? And we're going to stay connected, and I'm going to think about how I can help to be part of the solution. And this part of is what we do. It's on this journey that we're on, right? And it is something that's impacting our communities in a way that we have this past year has exacerbated what was already there, and we can't ignore it, right? So all I'm saying is I'm just ready to be being a part of that solution, and just continue to continue to, our table is everybody. There's no big U's and little U's, and it's we all that, and some people push back on that, but I don't care. That's how I roll, and that's how I'm gonna continue to roll. So I'm looking forward to working with all of you all and continue to fight this fight together, but also take care and love on each other, because love will and does win the day. So thank you for the privilege of being in this space today.
Thank you. And then Cleo?
Molly, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, so what excited me, or what I think is going really, really right with Sustained Equity Group, is the fact that it directly aligns with a passion of mine, and that is speaking on the trauma and providing tools to normalize that space. I think it's a safe space, and it's other people that look like me in that space, and those things that will probably be apprehensive or reluctant to say state or whatever, for fear of a dramatic difference of experience, I think can be said in this group. And I think that it's from it will, it's going to umbrella outward, if that makes sense. So I'm looking forward to the conversations that are to come. I've been talking about this a lot, and on my own, in my own regard, but to be connected to someone who has that passion for this space, I think it also is just, it's phenomenal. So I think that's why well, I want to use the acronym so bad, but Sustained Equity Group is very necessary. I know it's SEG, but I have so many S acronyms you don't even know. But anyway, so that's why I think it's A, very necessary, and B, right on time. We have to do something about what is being experienced. Oh, the other thing is, what I love about SEG is the fact that there are women, empowering women, but it's women from all walks of life and all across the country. And that excites me even more. That's my thing, because we can come together and establish what's the same about the communities that are very different. So yeah, I think that's it. I could talk all day. So that's all I got for now. Thanks, Kayla. invite.
And I do have to run because I got to go see my 4th grade teacher who knows I'm in town. He was real close to my mother who passed away 5 years ago. And, I'm a seasoned sister, but she's more seasoned. So she's like, you're late.
We appreciate it.
I got to run out of here. But to see her, haven't had a chance to do that. So I'm glad I've got to run over and see you.
Okay. Thanks, Melanie.
Y'all see you soon. Talk soon.
Melanie.
Thanks.
Yeah. And so, Yasmin, I am going to simply say for myself that because you're so effective in your opening and closing that I will not allow for you not to close. So I'm going to say that the best part of being able to be the president and CEO of Sustained Equity Group is you all, is that we get to mentor, we get to be friends, we get to grow, we get to hurt, we get to cry and laugh together, and just everything that we do as women of color, and being supported by women that are not Black or of color, but the ones that support us. Everything that we do is what is necessary for effective leadership and to impact real change that's sustainable, is because when women fight together, we just win. And it's great to see all these shades of chocolate that just melt together and just work no matter what it is. It just works. So I am honored and humbled and just really looking forward to these continuing table talks for women in violence prevention. And most importantly, I want to just say this. It is really important that we don't fail individuals like Cleo. There are so many women that I could name and want to, and looking forward to their next table talk coming up next month. In which Cleo will be joining us and Yasmin moderating. I'm so excited. Is that a lot of the women that we work with, when they bury their loved ones, still have to go to work. Because studies show statistically that Black women are usually the breadwinners in the family, and even in low-income houses, that they're the breadwinners, and that also talks volumes about the disparities that we face, challenges. And the one thing that I never, ever, ever, ever can ever get over is the volume of women, mothers, sisters, aunties, grandmothers that tell me that they have to bury their loved one and that their employment has no empathy. They say, get back to work. I don't care if you had to put your kid in, a tin can because you couldn't afford a funeral. My problem is work product. Yeah, you need to get to work or you're going to lose your job. And so it'd be great if we could do equity. Doesn't look like inviting people to the table and saying, hey, the equitable action was we invited you to this very important table. We even invited you to contribute towards decisions. Because when we show up, we typically are not showing up with the same resources, funding, or access. And that is not equitable. And so we want to do a better job at making sure that when it's time, we can have people like Cleo and all the other thousands of everyday, ordinary Black women that are doing extraordinary things. We can offer them the jobs with the pay. And it is not okay, as Marcia Dyson has said, to live and work in poverty. And just because you're in a nonprofit doesn't mean that you have the right to tell us we must work for nothing in order to serve. That's not how it works. So I'm looking forward to doing more and creating jobs, synergy, and making sure that this energy never disappears. So I'm going to go on mute, Yasmin, and say thank you all for sharing in my 1-year anniversary on Juneteenth, and look forward to what's coming.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
I will just close by saying that in preparing for this conversation, I wanted to just kind of see what other folks were talking about, how they were having these conversations, because these are some very difficult conversations. And I found an episode of Red Table Talk that was about the invisible Black woman, I think it was. And I thought it was so relevant to this space. Because, and it was something that Jada said that one of her friends told her, where, they use all the best parts of Black women to their advantage and leave us with the broken pieces. And we have to be what each other needs so that we can mend those broken pieces, but also hold on to the best parts of ourselves. And that is something that, stuck with me from that table talk, but also I see exemplified in this conversation today. So Kayla, thank you so much for putting this together, for bringing this group of phenomenal women together to have such an important conversation. I look forward to more conversations in the future. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
I'm stuck. All right. Well, I think we're good. I guess we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.